Good morning, Upper Sixth. So I was reading the Times over breakfast this morning, as you do, and I came across an interesting article to do with the live music sector in Wales. Over the years, under the Labour government, there's been underinvestment in the performing arts. Part of us would argue that maybe if there's not enough interest, then stop funding it. Part of us says if we don't fund it, then it might actually disappear. So we're seeing lots of underfunded performing arts. We're seeing venues close. We're seeing venues reduce the size of their audiences or the amount of performances they put on. And most strikingly, this week, they've closed the Natural History Museum, which I know is not live music, but when something as iconic as the Natural History Museum closes, there's something going on with public funding. Now, we're thinking about where public funding comes from. Well, that's taxes and borrowing. We know we've got issues with excessive debt in the UK. And also we understand that even though across the UK officially wages are increasing, I read another article yesterday that was saying that they're worried about the 5-point-something% increase in pay across the UK. It might fuel inflation. That's not in all parts of the world. And wage increases in Wales are lower than some other places, and this might be lower disposable income because of increases in other costs like heating and eating, and maybe less people are going to the concert because of it. Okay, so it's a nice case study. I've done an 8 marker here because I want to focus on 8 markers a little bit because I am scared of them, and we're going to look at demand. In class, we'll also have to practice doing 8 markers with a supply and demand diagram. They've only ever tested it in a couple of papers, but you never know, it might come up and I don't want it to throw you. So we'll practice that in class. It's easy. We'll knock it out in about 2 seconds and then do the 8 marker. So first of all, we need to focus on timing. This might be your first question that you sit down. You will want to be perfect. You will want to wow the examiner how awesome you are. You might be nervous. It might take you a couple of seconds, minutes to get started. Well, these things are a time trap. As we talk about in class, 1.2 minutes per mark. That's 10 minutes rounded for an 8 marker. And if you can do it less than that, then fantastic. You do not need 5 chains of argument. You do not need a conclusion. And we'll go through some common errors in a second, which I've taken from the examiner report. So this isn't me making it up. This is me plagiarising from the examiner reports. So we're aiming for level 3. Hopefully we can get full marks on this, but we are talking about a sort of a mini essay. So I think if you get in level 3 with this and level 4 and all the others and complete the paper, then you're doing well and you should be on track for an A grade, depending on the grade boundaries. So if we're thinking about it, we're focusing on the usual stuff. So we've got the word throughout, we've got context. It's so important. They mention it twice. You know how this goes. We've got to demonstrate good knowledge and understanding throughout, obviously. Our logical chains of argument. We're not talking about extended, yeah, or analytical, which is obviously the word we would see in 12 markers, for example. So we're looking at 3 chains of argument, well contextualized. And if you write these things contextualized, they're easier to write anyway. If there's quant or qual in there, we're going to be using that, mostly qualitative with this one. And we're thinking about those competing arguments in some ways, but we're not writing a conclusion. The trick is, whenever you write a point, this is the same in other essays, your counter-argument is for that point, not some random other point. Okay? So we're looking for 2 P paragraphs with a however on the end of it, and even the however needs to be contextualised. So, 2019 film. Not very good if I remember rightly, but it just reminded me. I was trying to find some sort of graphic to do with time trap. These are a time trap. These are often over-answered. So is the second 10 marker. Then you do the 12 and 20 marker as you would. And then the problem is you get to the second half of the paper, you have that oh crap moment. You've just realised you've mismanaged your time. The most frequently blank question in exam papers for Edexcel A-Level is the second 12 marker, and they're normally difficult. So people leave them, or they promise they'll come back to them later, or they just don't spend enough time on that 12 marker and the 20 marker. They rush it and they go down an entire grade boundary. And my gut feeling is that actually quite a lot of exam underperformance is poor time management at the beginning of the paper with the 8 and the 10, or in paper 1, paper 2, the 4, 4, 10. Those are just totally over answered. So, according to the examiner reports, here are some of the common errors. And I analysed a couple of examiner reports for you and put this together. So, lack counterbalance. So, people forget to put the howevers in. Assess 2 advantages. If you directly answer the question, one advantage is and another advantage is, it ain't balanced, don't expect more than 4 out of 8 marks. Okay? If your answer is overly descriptive, you're taking too long in lots of ways, but you need to contextualize everything. If you're just vomiting the textbook onto a page, then that's just weak essay technique. You need to be concise. Application, we know context is king. Incomplete chains of reasoning, well, you need to come back to the hook in the question and answer it overall. The advantage might be linked to a business aim, for example. Insufficient evaluation is really linked to those however points. We don't really focus on evaluation much, but we are thinking about how can you say those howevers. There is no conclusion. Okay, obviously some people make mistakes, that's just life. And again, overly long responses. Okay, make sure it's concise. This is from the examiner reports and just changed a little bit. You've got to make sure that these are concise, but fully contextualized and hit all the assessment objectives. So 8 markers. Include your counterbalance, be concise, use your context, avoid over-explaining stuff, and make sure that you've got your contextualised however points. Now, at this point, I'd like you to pause the video, read the tiny little case study that is here. But before we do that, I'd like you to read the question. So, assess 2 reasons. So we are going to choose one reason and another reason, and then we're going to do a however for both of them. We need to assess both of these, so we can't just say one positive reason is, one negative reason is, move on. If that's really well written in that format, I don't know, 5 or 6 out of 8, depending who's marking it. So assess 2 reasons why the demand, that's obviously our knowledge that we're going to define, for live music events in Wales has changed. Okay, so I've not been generous with this. The past paper question that I based this question on was talking about how sales had increased or something, and that sort of leads you. So you can look through this because it might have gone for the better in some sectors. You never know, but with this type of question, I'm thinking, I've just skimmed the case study, I haven't read it yet. What shall I focus on? Well, I'm going to quickly write down my definition before I go to the case study. So demand refers to the quantity of live music events that consumers are willing and able to purchase at various price levels. In the case study, it's influenced by factors such as disposable income and government funding. I gave you that in the intro to the video. Pause the video and now go and find 2 bits of evidence in some ways for stuff linked to disposable income and government funding. They're your 2 points in some ways, 2 reasons why. Hopefully you paused. Now, one reason is that falling disposable incomes have led to a reduction in the demand for live music events in Wales. I've underlined and emboldened connectives. There might be more in there, by the way, but we only need 3. And we're trying to keep this as concise as possible as long as it's contextualised. Because households have less disposable income, fewer people can afford to purchase tickets. There's a chain of argument. This reduction in spending power leads to lower overall demand for live music events, shown by the quote. Okay, I've put a quote in there, not to trick the examiner. but to make sure that I remember to contextualise. And you'll notice that it says shown by. That's an interpretation of the case study. It's a nice bit of signposting language. So, however, you'll notice I've left a space. I've then written the word however. I'm just making sure that I, the student, communicate to the examiner that this is a balanced argument. The word however is nice, lay it out nice and easy for your examiner to read, be their friend. If you make it easy for them to mark, then it's easy to mark. Maybe it's easy to give you the marks. However, the case study also states past recoveries have been seen in a resurgence in cultural spending, suggesting, look at that nice bit of signposting language of interpretation, that if economic conditions improve, consumer spending on live music events could rebound. That's a nice MOPS, future orientated, however. Another reason, you'll notice that I've said one reason, another reason. The question talks about two reasons, so let's make it easy for the examiner and me to make sure that we're talking about two reasons. Another reason is the cuts to government support and the closure of or downsizing of iconic venues have further reduced consumer interest in live music events. Because fewer events are available and popular venues are operating at reduced capacity, the excitement and attractiveness of live events diminish. Yes, you're not advertising it, are you? So maybe I'm not that interested. Maybe I'm interested in something else. Love Island was on recently. As a result, the overall demand decreases. So we've got a couple of chains of argument in there that I've not highlighted. This is shown by the case study, nice quote, and I've put leading to in brackets because I thought I'd add another connective in there, reduced audience attendance. Well, that's to do with demand. It's connected really nicely to demand using the quote. However, nice space between the paragraph. The case study also states private sector initiatives have begun to emerge as viable alternatives, indicating, look at that lovely signposting language of interpretation, that innovative funding or community support might help restore some of the lost demand. So we've got one reason demand has fallen, however, it might rebound. Another reason it's fallen, however, it might rebound. So is it truly balanced? Probably not. Is it balanced enough to get me into level 3? I would have thought so. Let's have a look. So here are the standards and a couple of pictures of closed venues. And we can see a reminder of the PH structure that is not specified in the standards, but that's probably what we're looking for. And I've already highlighted all the keywords in the level 3 standards. I think this is somewhere in level 3. You can decide if it's between 6 and 8. I don't really care. I think it's probably 8, but I'm happy to have discussions with you. Okay, so that's the end of that. Hopefully that was useful. Keep interested in current affairs and maybe write some of your own case studies and exam style questions and get your study buddy to answer them with you. See you later. Have a nice day.